Monday, and we're excited to have you on Hope Live. We're very excited that we are starting the Monday on a very energetic note. Well, for me, it's not, obviously, because you can tell from the voice, but I think sometimes I love it this way. Well, we're on TV, I won't even say. My name is Bright Sinkoze, and I'm not alone. Mwene is here with me. Mwene?
Well, you remember what happened last week? I was so overtaken by Monday blues, and you made fun of me. I think I'm the energetic one today. I'm very energetic and I'm very excited.
Well, I have the energy equally. I have the energy.
I don't think you do have the energy.
It's the voice that I don't have.
I think you do have the energy as much as I do.
No, I have the energy. It's the voice that I don't have.
Anyway, our viewers, you're most welcome to Hope Live. A beautiful Monday, and we are excited to be here. A very busy Monday, but we just couldn't let this go away. We just needed to be here.
Well, especially because it has to come at a time when everyone is talking about the national budget. But we have also indicated over time that when we talk about a national budget, I think it also transcends to issues to do with individuals, but also the church is not left out. I think as churches, we also take time and make budgets at the start of the year. And this is exactly the reason why we have to sit here. But before we go to the budget issues, the issue of music. Well, it's not even a Friday. We have to factor in something to do with music. Mwene, do you know Adventist music?
Well, that's a very difficult question to give a yes or a no.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned. But one thing I know is that there is a guideline and a directive of what we accept in the Adventist church as music that represents us as an organization.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's put it this way. Your take on Adventist music. Now, this is coming after we listen to this song. Quickly, it's a very brief song. It's not the whole song, right?
Yeah, we could play the whole song or maybe half of the song.
Half the song. And then let's get talking. Let's get to hear what you have to say. Immediately after that, we get into the conversation. But for now, let's listen to this song. It was trending on social media, and we thought we should bring this as part of the discussion that we're going to have on this platform today. The song comes like this.
Ndoshina para wali mushiba Umungo kakiresa Tewa kuswila kwengundu Iye mama Iye mama Iye mama Uwa kwande binguni Mama Iye mama Uyu Yesu wambaka
Well, the song is Bemba. I don't know. Mwene is telling me. What are you saying, Mwene?
Well, I had a few words.
You had a few words?
Yeah, I picked a
because
few.
You don't understand Bemba.
I do understand. I picked a few words that take you an employment and something to Golgotha. Yeah, something like that. Okay. But, you know, I was trying to just vibe to the song.
Skunking.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but here's the thing. It's not us to say what it is. It's you. Let's get talking. 097 0975. That's the number.
0976
151517.
You see?
Yeah, 0976 151517, and we'll be very excited to hear your opinion about that song. I will tell you there's another group that has done a song with almost a similar rhythm.
Oh, yeah?
It's in video form, but we're not going to play it now. But it has the same rhythm. He's a miracle working God. You remember the song?
Yeah. I do know the song, and I do remember the song.
So now, we have such. Is this a detour to what we are known for as Adventists or not? Is this accepted? I've heard and I've seen questions where people are saying, how do the people in Jamaica sing? When you get our hymn book, it's universal.
Yeah.
The way I am singing Abide With Me in Zambia is the same way they are singing Abide With Me in China. It's the same way they are singing Abide With Me in Japan.
Yeah.
But Jamaica. But when it comes to the songs that we compose ourselves, we tend to suit what is available in the country where you live in. For example, we have gospel rumba. Of course, not in the Adventist church.
Yeah.
But in many other denominations, they have no problem with gospel rumba. Rumba in itself is not appreciated by the Christians because the dancing and whatnot. Remember the twerking prophetess? Because the rhythm is taking her in that direction and she's twerking, and people are saying, this is not okay. But the question is, to who's the standard? Yeah. And that's the reason why we have this debate now going on. But let's get to hear from you. that particular song. We should be able to play it maybe in the other episode,
Sure.
where we are going to discuss Adventist music so that we get to know what really defines Adventist music. But let's get to our topic of discussion. Unless you have something to say on this one.
Well,
for now,
I really feel we leave this to the viewers to hear what they have to say concerning the song, because we picked it as a result of the many comments that we saw on social media, where others are saying this is okay and others are saying this is not okay, giving various reasons. Others are saying we do not have a standard Adventist music. What do we call the Adventist music?
All right, this is going to be part of the things that we are going to be discussing on Hope Channel, Zambia's Hope Live. As we move on, we are trying to assemble a team of music experts within the circles of the Adventist Church so that we can have a clear guidance in terms of Adventist music. But let's get to our main discussion for today. On the 26th of September 2025, the Minister of Finance and National Planning, Dr. Stumbeko Musokotwani, presented the 2026 National Budget to the National Assembly under the theme Consolidating Economic and Social Gains Towards a Prosperous, Resilient and Equitable Zambia. Now, the 253.1 billion kwacha budget, which is anyway 27.4% of GDP, prioritizes domestic revenue mobilization, debt sustainability, and targeted spending on key sectors such as agriculture, mining, energy, education, health, and social protection. It also outlines ambitious reforms in taxation, state-owned enterprises, and environmental sustainability. Against this backdrop, there is growing public interest in understanding how the 2026 budget will affect economic growth, job creation, infrastructure, social welfare, and debt management. To unpack these issues, we have invited a financial expert. He's an economist. If you'd like, Dr. Brian Ndlovu, and he is going to help us provide an in-depth analysis of the opportunities, risks, as well as implications of the 2026 budget for Zambia's economy as well as citizens. Now, like I have indicated already, it is all about trying to understand whether this budget that was presented is able to move from the paper where it is written on to the people themselves. The question is, will the 2026 budget deliver? Now, Dr. Ndlovu is not coming here for the first time. He has been on this program twice already, and this is his third time this year. Doc, we are privileged to have you once again on Hope Live.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, viewers. It's my pleasure, obviously, to come here and share a few sentiments, especially on matters that are of interest to the general public. Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. And before when it drives us in this discussion, as we engage you, just so people can understand, the budget is presented every year around September. Any special reason? It's something that some people are even saying, but why present the budget for next year in September?
Well, one thing that you would actually appreciate is that Zambia, the financial year in our country actually runs from 1st of January to 31st of December. And if you remember, I think it could be some 10 years back, the budget was actually presented in the first quarter of the year, I think around February, March, somewhere there. But the challenge that it used to bring was that you are presenting a budget when you're actually already into the year, when you have actually begun this implementation. And so the change then to present the budget before the beginning of the year is actually a move to ensure that the budget is approved well before you actually get into the implementation. And I think even at any level, household, institution and all that, I think that is a tradition that you've got to plan before you actually get into the implementation. And so this, in my view, is actually the most ideal situation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Just before we get into the discussion, why is the budget very important to the nation? And to narrow it even further, why is it important that we should be having these discussions, especially that some may think, anyway, we are Christians and things of this nature do not in any way affect us. Why is this budget important to the nation as well as to the Christian community?
Well, that's a wonderful question. And you see, when you look at the budget itself, it doesn't have a religion attached to it. When it comes to the things that will be executed, will be done from that budget, I think they cut across the whole population, the whole community, the entire country, and therefore there is not a single sect of our society that would say, oh, for us, the budget does not concern us and therefore we take little interest. The activities that the government would actually be implementing, you could talk about service delivery, such as in the education, in the health sector, in so many other sectors. All of us are actually beneficiaries, and so it means the amount that the government is actually committing towards such activities must actually be of interest to us, whether you belong to this church or any other church. All of us have to take this interest, and so it is not any peculiar for that as a church, as a channel, you should also take an interest, because these are things that affect the whole society. And then the other question that you also ask is, what is the importance of a budget? Now, to address this question, maybe let us actually take it, let's begin with an individual level, and then a family level, and then institution, and then later on you deal with a national level. So at the individual level, you could actually think of somebody that has just gone to a boarding school, and the boarding school, you know, you leave your parents at the beginning of the term, and you only get back home at the end of the term. So between the opening of the term and the closure of the term, in the words of the president, you could actually say you are on your own. So you are by yourself, you are the household yourself, you are the decision maker, you are the Minister of Finance. You have to plan basically how you are going to spend whatever stipend the parents could have actually given you. And therefore, if you have to survive, if you have to maintain a standard of living until the end of the term, it's very important that you actually plan how you're actually going to be spending. Because without a budget, you know, you could actually be tempted to spend all your money in the first week. And then what happens in the remaining weeks? So that expenditure has got to be spread. In the household level, it's the same thing. So people get paid once in a month, and that income actually has got to meet different needs and demands in the household. You've got to buy meal, you've got to pay for school fees, and sometimes you also have to budget for unforeseen eventualities such as sicknesses. There are a lot of things that we actually have to put some funds aside. So the importance of planning and the budgeting cannot actually be underscored, because it's something that is important at whatever level. At the national level, because you know, national level we're basically talking about the summation of individuals in the country, the summation of all the institutions, the summation of all the households that you have. So if the planning and the budgeting is very important at that lower level, what more at a higher level when you're actually talking about so many people, so many institutions, so many interest groups. So at the national level, then a budget basically gives us an indication of government's priorities, because remember, where you put money is also an indication of where your priorities are. So it gives us an indication of what government's priorities are, what it intends to achieve in the course of the year, and so that basically is what will be guiding the expenditure, the execution once we begin the financial year. But also the budget from the government side, you know, government is actually our leader as a society.
True.
So what the government is actually indicating as a leader could also be giving a signal to many other institutions that could also be carrying out activities that could maybe complementing government efforts. You might have actually noticed that even when the minister is presenting the government, he does actually acknowledge the efforts that are coming from many other cooperating partners, others coming from outside the country, but others also operating within. And so when you have a budget giving an indication of, oh, this is how much we are going to spend on such and such a sector, it also then gives an indication to other cooperating partners that this is how we are actually going to complement government efforts.
Right, sounds interesting, and obviously one would be looking at the figures, especially since this the team that is in power, they've been building from I think 100 billion, and now they are at 253.1 billion for next year. Looking at the figures, without even being detailed in your explanation, this shift from this one figure this year to now looking at 23.25, is it 253.1 billion? Are we saying as a country we are developing that much to a point where we need to spend that much? There is a lot that we're supposed to do, calling for this much money. This is coming at the backdrop where we've seen for quite some time now we've been told that we don't have money as a country, and now we are planning to spend more. Is that feasible? Is that necessary from an economical point of view?
Yeah, so to answer that question, maybe one thing that you need actually to look at is that the proposed budget for next year is 253 billion. Last year it was 217 billion. For those that are very quick with the arithmetics, I think that is about 17% increase.
Yes.
So it means the government this next year will actually be spending 17% more than what was actually budgeted for this year. And the question that you're asking then is, what is actually explaining this increase, this 17% increase? Now, when you are dealing with the monetary issues, financial issues, whenever there are changes in monetary values, there are usually two components that actually get into that. So the first one is that you know that the prices are never fixed.
True.
So if prices are never fixed, it means some of the increment in the budget actually is coming in purely because of inflation, that the way we are valuing the goods and services has gone up, and therefore even how much we actually intended to be spending the following year needs to be adjusted for that. So at a household level, if you have a household, for instance, that is buying a single bag of mini meal, the price of mini meal this year, you don't expect it to be fetching the same price next year. So there's going to be that adjustment that will come, and therefore when you are basically budgeting to buy the same amount of mini meal, it means the amount that you actually need to set aside will just increase naturally. The second one is that the economy is also growing in real terms. I do not have the specific numbers, but I think we've made quite some significant growth in real terms. And so when you combine this inflationary component versus the real growth in the economy, this is what will basically be contributing to the 17% that you actually see. So the growth in real terms, it means the amount of products that the government will actually need to deliver services and the goods to the people will actually go higher. And that is obviously the population has gone up. The population that we'll be having in 2026 is higher than how many we are actually in 2025. So there are a lot of dimensions that have actually changed. And so even when you are budgeting, then you need to keep on adjusting because of that. So you have the inflation component. You also have the real growth component. So I do not have the specific number in terms of how this is actually allotted, but these are the main components that actually get into understanding why every year the budget actually keeps on increasing. So from that, we also know that our GDP, which is basically a measure of how the economy is doing, which is based on the value of all goods and services that are produced in the economy by both the government and the private sector, is also increasing. So the budget then is basically also being adjusted to match with that.
Well, that's a very interesting submission, and maybe we pick it from there. The GDP, the inflation, and also we look at the assumptions that they are given and the revenue. How credible are they, the targets that have been projected? Do we Zambia's current economic, looking at Zambia's current current economic shift, are these credible marks, the assumptions that they're giving, are they going to work, or maybe it's too much for the country?
Well, you see, the credibility of targets usually depends on the history. So when you have a school-going child and you ask them, say, when you'll be writing the grade 7 this year, can you tell me how many marks should we be expecting as a family? And you know, sometimes the child can just dream and say, oh, okay, expect 800 from me, or expect 80, 99, which is just like one mark below the total.
Yeah.
And so when they're giving these, there obviously has to be some basis. And so for a child then that says, oh, expect 800 and something, then the next question that you actually bring in is, oh, can you show me the report forms?
Oh, yeah.
For the, could be past few years or terms before this, because it is a performance from the individual years. That is what would actually be contributing to what the child is actually targeting. And so when you find that what they are targeting does not in any way connect with the past performance, then you say, no, actually, are you just dreaming, or you are telling me something that is very serious? So similarly, when we come to what the government is actually projecting to achieve, we've got to look at the history, we've got to look at where we are coming from. Is it a government that has been this disciplined that you actually be able to get these achievements? Because you see, the other thing that you also need to bring into a picture is that 2026 is usually others would say is an election year. But the other term is, it is actually an electioneering year. Now, electioneering, it means this is when you are basically configuring all activities from a political angle, because ultimately the government wants to be re-elected back into office. So when you are getting into an electioneering year, it's very difficult, because many of the activities, sometimes, especially when there's no physical discipline on the part of government, you then started to get into this realm of populist decisions, where you are spending because this is what the general populace is actually are demanding for. And you know, the funny thing with the general populace is that everyone wants government expenditure increased, but no one ever wants to pay a higher tax. No one wants to make a contribution. So it means you're basically having an imbalance in terms of what the people want. They want a higher government expenditure. We want the government to be able to hire more teachers, hire more nurses, produce so much goods, restock all the hospitals with medicines. But when it comes to contributing towards that, everybody would want to fold their arms. And I'm glad you see the minister was actually emphasizing that every one of us must actually be willing to take part in tax contribution. And I think, you know, contributing towards the tax, it's not so much about the amount that one is actually contributing, but it has more to do with earning the title of being a taxpayer. That when people are talking about, oh, this is taxpayers' money, I must also have a title that I am he that you are referring to as a taxpayer. And so anything that is taxpayers' money, then it is actually my money. So I only earn that title if I'm actually able to make a contribution to our taxes. And this is why you've actually seen the government is actually trying to diversify the tax base, trying to capture a lot of these small businesses. And the idea really is to basically draw everybody on board. And when everybody is on board, then everyone will take an interest that, oh, this is the money that we have actually put in together.
The budget, Doc, as presented, did give an indication to say 82% of this budget is going to be locally realized. And I want to believe that even by that, if we are to get into any debt, the debt coming outside the country has to be within the remainder of 82%. From your experience and how you look at these things, what would be the implications of servicing more domestic debt than external?
Thank you so much. So, for me to tackle that question adequately, so government is saying we are increasing domestic resource mobilization.
Yes.
And like I said, if you follow the history, I think we are coming from an era where so much of government funds were actually either borrowed or coming in as grants from the outside, but we see that component actually continue to decline. So government is actually able to now take the bigger portion of the needed funds. So at 82, it means that is a high level of commitment that whatever we're going to spend, it must be coming from our pockets. So the minister also made a statement, I think, that they are limiting the borrowing, and we've actually seen, I think, quite a commendable decline in the acquisition of debt. And I think this next year, they've actually said they are not getting any new external debt. So the disbursements that will be coming are those that have already been acquired. That is a commitment that we got. You see, the challenge with the external debt is that so when you are borrowing, you borrow in dollars, but you then come and convert it into the local currency you spend. But the time you want to pay back, when you are converting back to dollars, sometimes you find that the kwacha has actually lost the grip.
Yeah.
And so the money that you actually have to mobilize in order to pay back is way, way beyond even the interest that was put. Just to give people simple context is when you look at the 3 billion that we borrowed some years back and versus the dollar kwacha exchange rate at that time, I'm not very sure of the actual figure, but I think it was way below 10 kwacha per dollar. So when you are multiplying that 3 billion by $10, it will be about less than $30 billion, but then kwacha. But then what is the current exchange rate? It's above 20. So it means when we borrowed the money, we are spending at maximum 10 kwacha per dollar. When we are paying back, we have to pay $20, 20 kwacha per dollar that we actually borrowed, not even talk about the interest that is coming there. So the issue of borrowing, and I think you know historically we've also been talking about that Zambia was actually a debt burden that I think we had actually borrowed way, way beyond. I will not talk about issues of sustainability, but I think the debt had actually become the bigger elephant in the room, and everybody was talking about the effects that it then had on the economy in terms of government not having room to actually invest in economic activities because we were spending so much money servicing the debt. And so I'm actually glad to mention that the minister did indicate that Zambia has now attained a lot of these debt restructuring agreements with many of our creditors. And so that then has actually given us room to be able to channel most of the resources that the government mobilizes towards our local investments. And so when you have gotten into this debt restructuring, it's basically a commitment that we were struggling to service this debt, but if you give us room, this is what we intend to do. And therefore, when you are given that room, it is not the time to then go back to get more and more debt. Because remember, you are coming out of problems because we had overborrowed. And therefore, it would be prudent for government to go full throttle again on borrowing. So on that aspect, I think it's actually a very commendable commitment that this government is trying as much as it can to actually limit borrowing. And this is something that is a bit strange because, like I mentioned, you are getting into an election year, and usually an election year, this is when we expect the government to be so reckless because the idea is to please the masses. But I think these have actually managed to demonstrate that they are actually more disciplined, financially disciplined, that even when we are getting into an election, I think they are trying as much as possible to remain on track. Because remember, it's always the most dangerous when people are clapping for you. Oh, yeah. Because when people are clapping for you, sometimes they don't even realize that now you are actually going off track. Yeah. But this is a government that even when people are clapping because now we're getting into an election year, they say, no, actually, debt, yes, it is good when it is properly invested. But again, there's also a limit in terms of how much you can actually acquire. Thank you.
So from the onset, this particular budget that was presented, for you by giving it a thumbs up or thumbs down. The reason I am doing this, I'm asking this question, is because we want to quickly focus on, I think, the sectoral aspect, where I think there were a lot of sectors that were given some percentage, to understand why that is. But from what we have established this far, the overall budget, 253.1 billion, is quite a substantial amount for a country that is struggling to put a number of things together. But from your own opinion, is this a yes or a no?
Well, it's very difficult to just say yes or no, because obviously people will be saying, oh, the yes has to be supported.
Exactly.
So
no, after you have given your submission, I said, okay, why do you say yes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So in my personal view, I think this is a commendable budget. I don't think we could have actually done any better than this. Now, some of the reasons that I would actually give you for that is, if we pick from the theme, for instance, the theme actually has 4 keywords. The first one is that you're talking about consolidating the gains that we have made so far. The second one is saying that consolidation must lead towards a prosperous, resilient, and an equitable society, an equitable Zambia. So if you are to break down these words, obviously prosperity means we must actually be growing as an economy, and you could actually see how much they are actually investing towards the economic activities when you talk about the economic empowerment programs. The second one, when you talk about the resilience, now resilience could actually be talked about in so many ways. And what is actually still alive in people's minds is the energy issues, is the reliance on rainfall. So, rainfall gives us agriculture, it also gives us energy. So resilience therefore means that we should make every effort to try and move away from this too much reliance on rainfall. That any year that it doesn't rain, then the whole Zambia is actually crying. Then the second one, you're talking about equity. Now, equity means that development should not just be in Lusaka. Development has got to be spread everywhere. When we say that Zambia is actually developing, a person in Kaputa must actually be able to see something pointing to that development. A person in Shangombo must be able to point to something at all. This is what they actually call development. A person in Ivubwi must actually have something that he must be pointing to. So when you look at, for example, the signature program, the CDF, that they are actually implementing, where you are basically throwing all the resources to all the corners of the country and allowing the people then to determine what they want to get out of that. I think it's quite commendable. Thank you.
And when you factor in the issue of the CDF component, there is like 40 million per constituents, and when you look at that, majority are saying this is not working. But from a budgetary point of view, and equitable as you have rightly put under the theme, if that has to be factored in, do you think increasing CDF to 40 million for next year is something that we should be excited about in terms of development?
So the 40 million, obviously, with the CDF, we are a society that is a bit slow in learning and also making reforms. This new CDF, I'm saying new because when it jumped from the 1.6 to, was it 20 something million, it becomes a new CDF because even in terms of its mandate is actually where we are broadened. This is now, I think, is it the 4th or so budget that is having that new CDF. But then this new CDF also requires that the capacity at the local level, the capacity in the local authority, because these are the ones that are actually implementing this CDF, that the capacity there ought to be built. And then, so in the initial years of this new CDF, I think we had the funds that were actually decentralized, sent to the constituencies, to the councils and all that. But the decision making, I think, largely remained in Lusaka. But I think over the years we have actually seen that even the decision making is slowly actually being decentralized, sent to the local authorities. But then there are these usual teething problems when something new that comes in. Sometimes we don't know how to handle it. And so in terms of the budget implementation, I think the CDF component is one of those sectors that has actually suffered quite greatly. We have seen, I think, even in the media where councils actually have these funds. But the ring fencing that is being done, the scrutiny that is being done, sometimes it just makes the program very difficult to implement. So people are not actually able to access these funds because the processes that one actually has to undergo in order to access these funds, sometimes they just make it impossible. And one of the reasons for that, you see, is Zambia. I know we are coming from this very centralized system where decisions are being made in Lusaka. And so when the ministry is developing these CDF guidelines, sometimes you are developing the guidelines having in mind someone that lives in Kablonga, someone that lives in Libala, someone that lives in Karingaringa, but somebody that is actually in Lusaka. And so the amount of access that they have to information, the amount of access they have to different resources is way, way better than somebody that is actually coming from, say, a far-flung district such as Kaputa and all that. So if a person that is in Lusaka is able to mobilize, put up such and such a plan and access these funds, is that the same case with somebody that is actually based in Shangombo? How much resources does a person that is in Shangombo actually have at their disposal for them to be able to put up these proposals? How much resources do they have at their disposal? How much knowledge? And see, these are things that are very, very important when you're actually designing guidelines and policies. You've got to look at Zambia as in being the broader Zambia, and not the Zambia that is defined by Lusaka or along the line of Reo. And so, yes, it is true that the CDF has actually suffered a lot of inertia, so we have a lot of funds that are actually dispersed, but are not being spent. And you know, people will only see the CDF, not on paper, but when there's something that is actually running in the community. So for me, the CDF that I should be looking forward to is a bridge, is a crossing point that I must actually see, is a grading of roads that I must actually see, is when I see somebody that was not able to go to school because they couldn't afford that, actually accessing that boarding bursary is when I see a lot of women being empowered. That is a CDF. So if we then fail to translate the CDF that is on paper onto the CDF that is on the ground, then it will be very difficult for people to actually appreciate that component. The other issue on CDF, you know, CDF is coming into basically drive development across the country, everywhere. But I think it also has one small gray areas that we could actually point to. So just to give you an indication, you know that Kanyama constituency, the population in Kanyama constituency, I think is way beyond 500,000 people. Just Kanyama constituency itself. And then I know there are many other constituencies, especially outside Lusaka, whose populations are actually less than 50,000. And so it means you have constituencies that could actually get into Kanyama 10 times. But then when you are giving out the CDF, the minister actually gives 40 billion across the board. So the question that you then ask, obviously the expectation is that actually when they initially introduced that CDF across the board, it was fine. But I think over time, we want this CDF to actually be able to take in variations in needs. We want a CDF that will be able to vary because these constituencies are different in terms of the population size. That means the number of women that are actually crying for this empowerment will vary. Secondly, the poverty levels in the country, I think, vary quite significantly. You have certain provinces, certain districts that have very high levels of poverty, and so you then expect that CDF should actually have these variations in order to cater for such. You also have the vastness of the constituents. Mainly for urban constituencies, you know, you could actually cover them in a day. Like you can travel from one corner of the constituency all the way to the other end. But the other constituencies where you actually need 2 days to actually just cover a significant portion of it. And so it means the cost of delivering services to such constituencies is much, much higher than it would be in urban areas. And so going into the future, I think in my personal view, we're expecting a CDF that is going to have these variations because you are giving it to constituencies that are not the same.
Right. Well, that's quite comprehensive. And now we also look at the expenditure priorities. We see that there were some allocations that were made in the education sector. There's a percentage, health, energy, and quite a number of areas where allocations were made. Let's try to assess and examine the allocations. Do they align with the development priorities, or do you think maybe others needed some adjustments, like you have mentioned the CDF?
Yeah, so you see the development trajectory that we are on. So first of all, we are a country that is kind of in recovery. Because 2023 was not a year to joke with. It's a year that will remain in our history.
Yeah.
And so 2025, I think we did a lot of recovery, but I think we need to continue on that trajectory. And so when you are in the recovery mode, then it matters how you actually spend your resources. It's very important that the resources that we have must actually be channeled in productive areas. But much as we are focusing on productive economic areas, we also cannot forsake the social sectors, for instance. Sure. We need the investments in the health sector, in investments in the social protection, because they say development has to take everybody on board. So you don't want anybody to remain behind. And then education, you see, education is a very interesting sector, because to some extent you can actually look at it as a social sector. But when you look at it in the long term, education is actually an investment, and there will be proceeds from the investments that we are making. And the proceeds that we actually expect, of course, they take a bit longer, and that is why sometimes people tend to make this disconnection that with education it's more of social, simply spending, just to keep people in schools and all that. But you know that a learned population is actually better for the future, for the prosperity of the nation. So one of the areas that we would actually want to highlight here is the allocation towards the empowerment programs.
Sure.
Now, empowerment programs actually come under different umbrellas. So you have an empowerment component under the CDF, you have an empowerment component under the CEEC, small and medium enterprises. You have an empowerment component under community development. You have empowerment components under the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Arts. And in all these components, actually, I was just looking at the numbers. There's actually an increase actually across all of them.
Oh, yeah.
So the empowerment component under CDF is up by 11%, under CEC is up by 32%, community development is up by 54%, Ministry of Youth, the empowerment component is up by almost 188%. That is actually more than double. And overall, the allocation towards the empowerment programs has actually gone up by 20%. And this, then we would say, it actually aligns very well with the projections that we want to develop the country. We recognize that we are coming from a situation where we basically had the calamity just 2 years ago, and we need to put the economy back on track. And so these are some of the allocations that would actually contribute quite significantly to growing the economy. Not to talk about other economic activities such as the allocation to FISIP, the allocation, I think, to roads. And when you're talking about roads, you have the developmental roads that are happening in compounds and the communities. But you also have these economic roads that basically enables the wheels of the economy to move with ease. And so when you say government actually increasing expenditures towards that, it tells us that this is a government that is actually trying to drive economic development further.
You from time to time, as we conclude, we're being reminded that we need to wind up now. But you kept on referring to the 2026 budget that is coming in the year when the country has to go, obviously, for elections. And you giving this particular proposed budget a thumbs up is exciting. But other players within the governance system may reach at a point where they say Obviously, this was just done in order to win the support from people, knowing that we are going into a year that is very decisive when it comes to making our intentions as citizens be known to people that are governing us. Do you think this is politically charged?
Well, you know, when you have to look at whether a government budget is actually politically charged, we've got to look at what are some of the components that actually would be indicating the presence of politicking or electioneering. Now, I have mentioned that when you are going towards an election, usually if a government is not financially stable, usually there's a temptation to please the people. And how do you please the people? It is to spend more and tax less. That means, and how do you tax less? By spending more and taxing less. It means you basically increase the reliance either on grants for which you have no control over, or you actually get more and more debt. That is how electioneering budgets are done, that get more debt, make it easier for the people, and spend more. But actually, we are seeing the opposite here, because actually, even when you just look at the past, I think, 3 or 4 years, this government has actually demonstrated that they are actually trying to rein in on data acquisition. So the debt component has actually been declining, I think, quite consistently. But then, and then we're actually increasing reliance on our own resources. Because remember, the only way to prosper as an individual is that you need to reduce the reliance on other people's pockets. That you must have control on whatever that you are actually spending. And that is one way to also ensure that you actually are more resilient, because when you have control over your resources, you decide when to spend. But when your resources are coming in from other people's pockets, the other people have to decide when to give you and when not to. So we have a budget that basically has increased the reliance on domestic resources, reduced the reliance on debt, and actually committing not to acquire any new debt in the coming year. And so what more then would you actually say? Because if it was electioneering, we should have expected the opposite. But this is a government that is actually trying to demonstrate prudence even when they will actually be out there scouting for votes. So in my view, I don't agree that this is an electioneering budget. I think this is a well thought out budget that is trying to build a better Zambia. Because remember, whenever you eat something on Nkongole, whenever you eat something because it is coming in because of debt, there will always be a day when you have to work without eating because you have to pay back that debt.
Okay. Will it, looking ahead, will this budget lay a solid foundation towards the 9th National Development Plan?
I think the foundation that we are talking about, one, it has to start with, first of all, diversifying our economy, diversifying our energy from too much reliance on hydro, because, you know, I think our energy sector is almost 85% hydro, and whenever it doesn't rain, it means you have that 85% actually being affected. So it means if you are to build a foundation, then the foundation has to start by, first of all, reducing that reliance on rainfall for energy. Secondly, the same rainfall is giving us the agricultural output. I think a lot of investment that the government has actually been promoting through irrigation and many other projects will in a way move us away from this rain-fed agriculture, which is obviously affected by the ever-fluctuating rainfall. And then the issue of CDF, I think, is also helping quite okay in terms of building a foundation at the community level. And, you know, it's not something that you can actually do in a year, but you have to keep on building. And now, because when you bring on the issues of building a foundation, you know that you can only build a foundation if you are very sure that the one that is coming after you is actually going to build the upper part. So that means we need to become a society then that values the foundations. And when I say to value foundations, is that we must recognize that this person, even if they have not built a house, there is something that they've actually put up. They've put up this foundation such that the one that is coming after they will start from here and build going upwards.
And maybe that's where the problem is. Unfortunately, we have to close that door. The problem has always been before your salary enters your account,
So
you
we
think
spend.
well, you plan good, your plans are marvelous. But the moment you'll hear the ting ting, the brain is confused. Maybe this is what should probably be worrying most of us as citizens, to say, this looks good, you've given it a thumbs up. But then will it really be executed as planned to benefit the sectors that it's supposed to consider? But that's a question for another day. Thank you so much for coming through to today's program, Doc.
It was my pleasure, and thank you so much to those that have been following us, and I'm sure the little that we have shared should help you to make better decisions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Mwena, let's conclude.
Well, I had so much questions for Doc, but time has been so jealous. And we'll still invite you back so that we can actually look at this budget in depth and also look at some of the things that have remained. Otherwise, we are so grateful that you made it, and I believe our viewers have greatly benefited, just as I have benefited from your explanations, because when the budget was being presented, the language was so foreign to some of us. But I believe what you have explained in layman's language is highly appreciated. Thank you so much, Doc.
It was my pleasure. So as long as the Almighty continues to give us a good life, we will make ourselves available.
Amen.
Thank you.
Right, we end here for today. We anticipate to be back on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
I'm saying we anticipate because this gentleman says he's not going to be around for how long?
Just 2 weeks, anyway. Yeah.
We'll see you on Wednesday.